We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's conservative website. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone-stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
That's right, folks. GrokTALK. GrokTALK, your weekly podcast from those ADD bunch of bloggers at Granite Grok. Granite Grok is the producer of GrokTALK. Granite Grok is New Hampshire's leading conservative and libertarian blog site where we opine and commentary on anything that amuses us, that you might think is newsworthy or just catches our attention. Squirrels. Today, it's still a very warm day out there. It is the 20th of July. We are broadcasting from the CNHT studios here in Concord, New Hampshire, and it is a bright sunny day. It is hot, it is muggy, and it's also market days here in Concord. Much to the dismay, I think, of a lot of the people who were setting up for the weekend, mostly because a storm came through here last night and blew a lot of those pop-up tents to smithereens. As I was walking in, since the roads were blocked off, I'm walking around saying, boy, some of these guys really set up pretty poorly. And then it hit me, the storms last night. And a lot of these people are going to be looking at all the stuff that they've lost, stuff blown down the streets, their pop-up tents. It's just mangled.
I had a short power outage yesterday. I looked at the PSNH website, or as I prefer to refer to it, the PSNH outrage report, as opposed to outage. And it looked like a line of thunderstorms had gone through. There were scattered outages in southern New Hampshire early in the evening, and then by around midnight there were much wider spread outages in a line running sort of southwest to northeast up through Concord, and in your direction almost.
We did get a few really close claps of thunder and shards of lightning. Mm-hmm. Certainly scared the dogs. They came jumping up into our laps. I don't think that our newest one has heard that much thunder and lightning yet. But, yeah, it was rather intense. But I do feel for the folks that are thinking that they were coming back for a couple of days of marketing here on the main street of Concord, and they're going to see that nothing's left. And it's unfortunate. So, folks, if you do have the chance, well, actually, by the time you hear this, since we're not live streaming yet. That's coming in a week or two, pray for them.
Well, interesting. Speaking of praying.
But I do want to say we do have Grokster Mike. That's who you heard talking about the PSNH outrage report. And we have Grokster Susan here as well. Hopefully later on we are going to have Jeff Chidester as a special guest. Most of you here in New Hampshire are knowledgeable about who Jeff Chidester is, conservative activist. He is also a talk show host of New Hampshire Perspectives. He is Master of Ceremonies extraordinaire.
Oh, yeah.
And just an overall good guy, sharp, witty kind of person, and he should be dropping in later on. Grokster Susan, you brought in a special guest.
Very special guest, and I'm delighted. I probably should have come a bit earlier to get the air conditioning on for all of us, but I brought with me this morning my dear friend, Father Christian Tudor, the pastor of All Saints here in Concord, and talking about extraordinaire. Father Tudor shepherds quite an interesting congregation and tolerates and forgives and has endless hope for souls like myself, for which I'm eternally grateful, really, literally and figuratively. So Father and I have had so many interesting conversations since we met, and I'll never forget the first day. We were right up the street at Capiano, or whatever they call that place. And I was with a good friend of all of ours, Jane Cormier, who had yet to become a state rep. But we were plotting and planning to do a bus tour here in the state called Schizophrenia, with the schizo being S-K-I-T, talking more about a little play to go on. And this was after that horrible woman, Judith Rosen, was making nasty cracks about Mrs. Romney, that, she'd never worked a day in her life and blah, blah, blah. And so we were thinking, gosh, women do so many different things, especially those that do stay at home, that perhaps they were a little schizophrenic. They're cooks and drivers and artists and nurses and psychologists. And so Father Tudor had accompanied Jane that morning, and we were talking about what sort of music we wanted to use for part of the skit. And I'd been worrying about it. Jane's husband, Carlos, well, they both teach music, but Jane's husband would have been kind of in charge of the music aspect of it. And I said, okay, so what I want for music, Jane, you may not be familiar with this, but it's from a band called Queen in the 80s, one of the glam bands. And I was saying it's called, no, I said it's called Under Pressure. And I said it's got this really sort of great rhythm to it, and the words are great. And Father goes, oh, yeah. Boom, 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 boom. He knows the words. He knows the music. And Jane turns and looks at him and goes, really? So from that moment on, this is my Father Confessor in so many ways. So, good morning, Father.
Good morning.
How's that for an intro?
Wow, what a wind-up.
Boom, 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 boom.
It's better than what I usually get.
I join in, but I can't hold a tune like that.
Well, I want to say welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We've been told that we can be very dangerous people to be associated with, so...
Really?
Yeah.
They keep files on us.
Well, they do meet also, yes. All of us are in the same boat, so that's what we have to remember. We have to all stick together with this one.
But we've had so many discussions on things that, not only are newsworthy, but sort of relevant to everything that we believe and the things that we do and the desires that we have for our children and our kids, and they all sort of come down to real foundational values that are either disparaged or perhaps no longer thought to be, it's kind of old-fashioned, but they're all still good stuff. Being kind, being responsible, being honest, being nice. I mean, there's this whole Ten Commandments thing, and I keep wondering.
Here it comes.
Our friends on the left, they don't care for religion, right? Basically, because it's, I guess, oppressive and tells you...
It holds them to account.
And it occurred to me that, there's really only 10 commandments, of which I am aware. There may be some, auxiliary chains here, but basically there's 10. And I'm wondering, which of the 10, really, what is it about these sort of basic values that they find so abhorrent or old-fashioned? I apparently it's who needs to respect their mother and father? Do away with that one. Which can we toss over the transom, Father?
Well, which can we throw away?
Let's put him on point right off the bat. Holy cow.
Considering I believe that all of them are equal in value.
Indeed.
We have to remember that the Ten Commandments can be found in almost all societies, whether religious or not. It's just the basic way of knowing how to treat someone, especially the last, there's 7. The last 7. The last 7 usually have to deal with humankind, about how we deal with each other. And they're pretty basic. I mean, when a child is growing up, you look at them and you go, okay, from the very beginning, instinctively, we know what's right and wrong, right? You don't take something that's not yours. You're not argumentative. You don't take a life. You don't take something's life. You don't. So all of us are really. It's ingrained in us.
Isn't it embodied in law as well that you if you steal something and you get caught, you go to jail? Or
well, usually in
a lot of it's
in the
law.
other in Asiatic countries, you get your hand cut off.
Indeed,
or in Arab countries, yes, that's right. So maybe if we started doing that, maybe we wouldn't have to use the commandments so much, and people wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
So enforcing the commandments in the guise of law, maybe not a bad thing.
Well, I look at it, you talk about cutting hands off, and I look at it as how do you show social stigma towards a particular behavior.
Shame? Do you mean shame?
Shame. I think, and that's where a lot of, we have seen, as you started off with, that we have seen the traditional values of American life turned upside down by progressives, by secularists, who have decided that they don't want to be held accountable. You talk about the, Father Christian, you said that the last 7 are more pertinent to behavior, but you look at the first ones. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Mm-hmm. And you look at our foundational documents, and what is the absolute message that you get from that? That we are men, but we receive our rights from our Creator. Mm-hmm. And in that, I think that there's this tremendous discussion going on. Did our founders believe in God? Were they just deists? Were they Christians? Were they this? Were they that? And I look at, we have a multiplicity of sects in the Christian faith, and I think we represent 4 different ones as we sit here right now. But I think
does Texan count?
Texan.
That's a whole other religion. Whole other one.
But we all say God comes first. Secularists, progressives believe that government comes first. So to your point, Susan, of turning things upside down, I do believe that is exactly one thing that they want to do. Is that because if they can jettison the idea of God, that they can jettison the idea that there is a higher power to which we will all be accountable to, either now or later, they can get away with pretty much whatever they want. It's sort of like homosexual marriage. If the biblical precept of 2 people, male and female, is jettisoned, that it now becomes genderless, I see no reason, please forgive me, so what's so special about the number 2? I mean, once my foundation has been wiped out, which is the biblical one, we're now hearing all kinds of things: polyamory, polygamy, incest, because now with contraception, there can be, and abortion, there can be the idea of that there is no result of that joining. I mean, it gets kind of distasteful to get into the details, but at some point, a lot of these people are saying, who are you to stop me? Who are you to judge me? And that's what I get, so which...
And the point is, it's not for us to judge them, that they will be judged.
Indeed.
Whether it be by society as a whole or by, ultimately, their God.
Eventually, whether they believe in one or not, according to what we all believe here.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. And what people don't understand is that even if you don't have a religious belief, is that you have to have parameters in a society. Because you have to be able to live within a society. And if we're coming out of we are Judeo-Christian in our origins, that is what the what the drafters of the Constitution actually took as their base. If we're going to reject it all, then we got to rewrite everything. And is that not what is happening nowadays? Is that all the laws that have been put up to this time, that have been enshrined in the American society, if we go away from what Judeo-Christian ethics and morals are, you have to create a whole new set because it doesn't make sense anymore.
And so you get the proliferation of the regulatory state, because instead of having a simple set of principles and a simple set of laws to which everybody's held accountable, now nobody's responsible for their actions, but everybody has to be held accountable for the slightest infraction against incomprehensible regulations instead.
Right. It comes down to, are we to be governed by internal governance? The little guy sitting on your shoulder whispering, you really shouldn't be doing this. No, this is not a good idea. This is not going to turn out well. And no, it's not right. To, okay, they just flick them off the shoulder, and the camera should be able to get that, I hope. As opposed to, here's all these laws that have been put up. And the problem with that is that the little guy on your shoulder, it's a binary operation. Either you're listening or you're not. There's no halfway deal. When you have external governance, they're like steel bars. And the question is, can you seep through them? And my favorite example of that was Al Gore raising money at a, at the monk's place.
At a Buddhist temple.
Sorry. Buddhist temple with it. All the monks had taken a vow of poverty, and he raised lots of money. And he
said there's no controlling legal authority.
That's the point. It wasn't right to do that. It was bad PR. But at the same time, he said, well, there's no law against it, so why not? So people are always looking for the edge. So as we transfer from that internal governance to that external governance like Father Christian is talking about, and we are seeing that, by the way, people are going to say, okay, how do I game the system?
Yeah.
And that comes to a society where basically, as we're seeing from the very top of our governance right now, lawlessness. We're transitioning from the rule of law, to the rule of man.
And it's arbitrary and capricious. And what you were just saying, Skip, gave me a sort of vision. The problem with communism is that they try to centrally manage the economy. The government tries to know everything in order to manage the means of production and distribution. In the case of laws and morality, we're seeing the same thing. Instead of having local morality and city and state laws, we're getting a suffocating mass of federal regulation where they presume to know everything that has to be protected against, and in the end, mess life up for everybody.
That's correct.
Good point.
So, from your perspective, Father Christian, sorry to startle you. Good morning!
Squirrels!
To me, governance is supposed to be a middle layer. Our philosophical foundation should be underneath that. And as you rightly point out, it was a Judeo-Christian philosophy that many of us still adhere to. But we see so many people attacking it, and then are then able to attack that next level up of the federal, state, and local governance, where society is on top. Such upheaval. From a morality standpoint, do you see goodness in what is happening right now? Do you see negativity, or
how about evil?
Well, that's a really good point, because a lot of progressives and secularists don't believe in evil.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, they do.
They are it.
Yes. This little group here is considered evil and divisive and uncaring and unloving. So, yes, they do, but it's always a value judgment that they make. That if you don't agree with what they believe in, then you are the enemy.
But wait, who are they to judge us?
I always say that. And they go, oh. I said, yeah, not so loving, are you?
Yeah.
Well, you know what? My favorite thing is when they say, stop being so judgmental about what's, your right and wrong may not be mine. And they always throw at me the woman at the well parable, where the Pharisees and the Sadducees decided that they were going to confront Jesus and get him on a religious nitpick, because this lady at the well had several marriages and was living in adultery at the present time. And that's where the famous phrase, he who hath no sin, cast the first stone. And I may have mangled the quote a little bit, but you get the idea. And all of the Pharisees and Sadducees, realizing the truth of that, all slunk away. And a lot of people who are, coming after me for being evil, as you said, they never bring up that last part of the parable, which is where he says, go and sin no more. Jesus himself was judgmental, rightly divining goodness versus evil, or right versus wrong. And they hate it when you bring that up.
Go and sin no more. What our Lord says in that passage, it's very, very simple, is that we know what right and wrong is. She knew what right and wrong was. Mm-hmm. But he's always ready to forgive when we realize how badly we've screwed it up. But then he says, don't do this sin anymore, okay? You've been healed, you've been redeemed, but don't do it again.
Because you know better.
That's right. He's assuming that we all know better. But as we were going back to your former question, with society is that Judeo-Christian values are there and they're set. The traditional churches teach and the traditional synagogues teach exactly what was handed down to them. As we see in the liberal Christian congregations and Jewish congregations, they change. They are changing doctrine. They are changing moral standards. They are changing whatever would fit now the new morality.
The social gospel.
That's right. Ooh. The social gospel. They are changing what they consider to be outdated, to be not relevant for the for the new person in the Americas. Something that they look at Scripture now and they see it as hateful. They see the actual foundational documents of Christianity and Judaism as being full of divisive hate. And now it's time to change it, or just to jettison it.
They've been enlightened is the word I hear all the time.
That is not called enlightenment.
No. And I think you're seeing the consequence of some of these, what used to be called the mainline Protestant churches, for instance, although it's not just limited to the Protestant churches, as you well know.
No.
You look at the plummeting membership. I've documented on Granite Rock, just watching, as an evangelical Christian, watching the Presbyterian and Episcopalian high liturgy churches go down that road, and watching what's happening. Their pews are being hollowed out. They're selling in my home, in the town next to me. The local Episcopalian church has just become a YMCA center.
No,
there
really?
There was nobody in the church, even at their last worship service to deconsecrate the church. There was nobody there.
On the other hand, I'll bet you that the preachers that do real fire and brimstone, preferably the Christian type, not the Jeremiah Wright type, have packed pews every weekend.
You look at some of these churches, I'm not sure I would fit in at some of the mega churches, because sometimes they start off real well and then they kind of move towards the left and they go towards more of a social gospel. But you go, a lot of those churches are big, and they keep drawing larger and larger congregations. And we could do a whole Saturday based on this type of discussion. But it really comes down to, what are you preaching? What are you telling your congregants? Are you making a distinction between you and them, inside versus the outside of the walls? What do you believe in, and what can you take from inside the walls to the outside of the walls? Which also brings up another problem, which we're seeing from on high right now, where the First Amendment is being distorted. Instead of the free expression of religion, we're seeing President Obama saying freedom to worship. In other words, just by changing a couple of words, he's saying you're free to do whatever you want inside the four walls of your house of worship. But once you come out that door, you've got to become a secularist. Of course, now he's losing in court badly over that. Hobby Lobby being the latest one, who's gotten the big hobby type chain store that they've gotten another stay against the HHS mandate against contraception. They believe that it's evil. They don't want to pay for it in the health insurance that their employees get. And right now, it's looking like that HHS mandate is going to be deemed unconstitutional.
Are you sure?
So far,
the last judgments coming out of the Supreme Court have not been that well.
Well, actually, there was a 9-0 decision when it came to the right of who had. What was it? I know what it is, and I'm not going to come up with the right words. But who churches hire? They don't have to adhere to the strict discrimination, because that's part of the religion. You can't have an atheist be brought. You cannot demand to have a job within a church that says that's wrong. It doesn't work that way.
Freedom of association?
No. Ministerial. I can't remember the last word.
That's all right. We know what you're talking about. But yes, they did get that.
Yes, and it is so far the Supremes are upholding that, because at that point the wordage is clear. Freedom of religious expression. There can be a lot of ambiguity on the Second Amendment, and we've certainly seen that, versus bearing arms and militias and all of that, but this is rather straightforward. And the Supremes, even the liberals on the court, have said, you can't do that.
Right. Well, as I've always said, to put it in one sentence, it's freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. You can't invoke separation of church and state here. All that means is the state shouldn't tell you what to do.
How to worship, yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
Because we as Christians know, you're not, although we have people who do this, they're Christians when they go in through that door, and when they come out they just act as if there was no difference. For most of us, though, the way that we act inside the four walls is the same way that we act on the outside.
We try very hard.
Yeah,
those aren't Christians, those are hypocrites.
Yes. And I'll go out on a limb that a church that really doesn't believe what its holy scriptures say is nothing more than a country club with pews.
Right, and I'm the opposite of those guys. I don't go to church much, but I try and live a basic Christian life.
I would second that. I have been looking for a long time for what I call a Bible-based church. I grew up in a big family. I'm one of 7 kids, and my mother, God rest her soul, on Sundays would ferry us off to a myriad of different Sunday schools. And it could be a Lutheran church one Sunday, or a Methodist, or a Protestant, or, my godparents would, this sounds weird, but my godparents were Jewish, right? And so occasionally she'd we'd go, she'd get a Saturday off and drop us at temple. But her says, well, when you grow up, you can decide what religion you like. Which I thought was, not exactly what I understood, but of the 7 brothers and sisters, a few of us actually decided to take on faith and be baptized and become Christians, and none of us were baptized in the same sect, Protestant-wise. But finding a good Bible-based church where it isn't all singing, forgive me, is difficult. I love All Saints, though. I love All Saints. So it's just a long ways from where we live.
Correct. Now, we're starting to come down near the end of this segment.
Uh-oh.
This is not what I expected to start off with, but hey, this is what happens when you try to just have a conversation, which is what we do. We don't have a talk show. We just talk a lot and converse with each other. And I'm glad that we did this, because it does come up with some stuff that hopefully you don't have a chance to normally talk about out there. Any kind of a wrap-up from you, Father?
Really? What do you want me to say?
Well, if you were to look back at the last 18 minutes, 19 minutes, and
should I really have done this?
But is the Christian Judeo values still valid in today's world?
Absolutely. And we've been talking about churches, and we've been talking about churches that don't follow what the scriptures say. And if you don't do that, you do a disservice to your people, because every preacher, at least anyone that went to a good seminary, was taught it's not about you. It's not about you. You have to preach what you've been given. You have to let people know what God wants for them through His Holy Scripture. And it's not up to you to put your own spin on it. So any place that you might go, and for any Christian, any church that doesn't preach Jesus Christ yesterday, today, and forever as your Savior, walk out and find a place that does. Because anyone that doesn't is not Christian, and they're not worthy to have you in their pew, because they're not feeding you, they're killing you.
Ooh.
Right. The only place I think personality plays in that is the delivery. I think a good father can be interesting and entertaining while still delivering the Christian message undiluted. But that's not a cult of personality so much as an engaging personality.
Indeed. And I guess as we come down to the last couple of seconds here, I know that the music is just about ready to play.
I think Father's going to stick around.
I would hope that he would. Can you?
Sure.
Okay, folks, I'm Skip. She's Susan. He's Mike. And he's Father Christian. We are GrokTALK, a production of GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site. We will be back in just a little bit, folks, and we're going to switch gears. I've got a Q&A roundtable discussion for us all from news and features of the day. We'll be right back.
GrokTALK.
Oh, the music has stopped. Guess what? We're back. We are GrokTALK, a production of GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative and libertarian blog site. We are glad that you've taken a bit of your time, whatever day and what hour that you are listening to our podcast, and glad to have you along. We are talking, well, we're going to switch gears. We were talking about Judeo-Christian values undergirding our social enterprise in the last segment. Basically, a whole bunches of stuff. I'll recap that when I do the post later on. But we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about other things. Last night I sat down and went through a bunch of posts, and I've got a bunch of questions to ask. So we're going to try to do a little bit of a roundtable here on some of these things. And
oh, good. Just like the five, or
on the idea of the five, except we are the Fab Four today.
Fab Four, I like that.
Yeah. So
my haircut's wrong.
But your accent's right.
Yes. So I'll start off with an easy one here. And pulled this one from The Five on Fox News yesterday. Who kills more Americans, Smith & Wesson or Ben & Jerry's?
Ben & Jerry's.
Ben & Jerry's.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yes, but Ben & Jerry's tastes good.
Like all evil going down.
Just sucked right in, right? Just sucked right in.
No, he is over here. Oh, this is cool.
Okay, now we have the five for your roundtable questions, Skip.
Yes, Jeff Chidester, one of our favoriteest guys here in New Hampshire, is joining us, and of course, just to get a wry smile out of him, and maybe a little bit of a chuckle. How's your parking gone?
Oh, are you kidding me? That's the key to your guest booking, right? Just to let them know there's a big festival going on. I love festivals like this anyway, but my GPS brought me all the way back here and over here. And
yeah, I was rather surprised this morning, too. It did look like a war zone here. And I'm parked a couple of blocks up, and we all have stories about that I'm the stupid one for being so far away. So,
no, I'm not too far away. I'm right up the street.
Yeah. So Jeff is a conservative activist, talk show host of New Hampshire Perspectives, MC or Master of Ceremonies extraordinaire, and overall nice, good guy. We appreciate you coming in today.
You would say that, of course, but many people on the left don't have those same kind of ways of describing me.
Well, yeah, I should talk about one of my county commissions. Yeah,
it's the path of good or the path of evil.
Yes, I'm on the list, and I've got the picture falling out of the manila envelope to prove it. But as one of the county commissioners, Democrat Ed Philpott of Belknap County said at the Democrat monthly meeting up in Belknap County, we're evil. But it's nice to hear you starting to say, I don't care what you think anymore. And I think most of us should say the same.
Right. Well, I think that one of the big keys, and you guys know this, as we're out and about in the community, people don't know we're conservative or liberal, whatever we do. All they can see is the actions in which we participate in. And I think what gets missed a lot is that they're not seeing us as part of the community and doing things within the community and doing simple things, even if it's working in soup kitchens, helping out any charity we can, the donations we give. And I think that's part of the problem with the rhetoric in America right now is this need to villainize certain members of their own community, and it's just unfortunate. That's not to say that I don't throw things back at them, but I'm very careful about how I do it. And the good thing is like most of you, I know the people who I'm talking to and how I'm talking about them. I know their history, so I know what degree of respect I can give them. Even if I disagree with them or not, if I disagree with them, or I also know, where I've gone, and some of you might have done this as well, is I won't appear on shows with certain people just because, one, I just don't find a lot of integrity coming from that individual person, and if I'm going to debate somebody, I would rather debate someone I may disagree with 100%, but there is some integrity in that person. And I think that's what we've started to do in the conservative movement is say, look, I'm not going to talk to you, and I am going to talk about the issues, though. So,
well, our first segment, we were talking about the underpinnings of our society, the underpinnings of conservative thought, which is Judeo-Christian theology
Absolutely.
And philosophy. And on that backstop, I come up with a whole list of questions on things of the day, and we just started in on the first one, and maybe we'll switch topics now that you're here. But I'll ask you the same question: who kills more Americans, Smith & Wesson or Ben & Jerry's?
Well, probably Ben and Jerry's. Without a doubt. I mean, not probably. We know that to be true as well, and. It is interesting how we end up having those conversations. You throw that out to somebody, and of course, if you throw it out to somebody who is very adamant about the Second Amendment and understands the Second Amendment, that they understand the purpose behind the question. If you throw it out to somebody who opposes the Second Amendment, how many blank stares do you get? You should go out on the street today with your great carnival going out here. You should go out on the street and ask that question. And I guarantee you a lot of them would look at you and wouldn't have the integrity to give you the right answer. Because the right answer is Ben & Jerry's.
Of course, the corollary question or the follow-on question is, how do you stand your ground with a pint of ice cream?
Yeah, well, there's something to be said about ice cream.
You can laugh out loud, Susan.
I will give ice cream its potential defensive. Who could say no to a really good chubby hubby ice cream? I mean, it could be a disarming tactic. I don't know if I necessarily want to try it, but I used to tell a joke when I was a policeman to try to calm people down and disarm them, and a lot of them never got the joke, and they would look at me, but it was the disarming technique. But like I said, I don't know if I want to necessarily try it.
Any other comments?
Wow.
I always preferred Baskin-Robbins chocolate fudge ice cream myself, but anyways, Ben & Jerry's fit the question.
Where I come from, we have
here we go with the Texas accent again.
an ice cream manufacturer called Bluebell.
Oh yeah,
You can only buy Bluebell ice cream in Texas. It was sort of like Coors beer back in the 60s and 70s that you had to go on the race to go
right.
get the beer and get it back to Oklahoma.
West of Texarkana.
Yeah. But Bluebell ice cream, I would take any flavor of Bluebell, particularly when they would do the fresh peach. I would take over Ben & Jerry's any day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You just can't get it up here.
Okay.
It's wasted on Yankees, I suspect.
I think it's time for a cannonball run.
For Bluebell ice cream. That'll be really good.
Or with that slight, maybe just the cannonball.
There you go.
Rent a reefer. No, not that kind.
All right, here's another one. American jurisprudence at its finest. We all know that one of the biggest topics of the day is the city of Detroit. After decades of the blue social model governance, in other words, Democrats, it has finally run itself into the ground from a high of 2 million people to less than 600,000. extraordinary means of pricing itself out of the marketplace with overly high salaries, corruptions, and pensions. And finally, the Republican governor, Snyder, through his emergency manager, put them into federal bankruptcy, Chapter 9, which has upset the people who depended upon the government there to no end, because they see, I might be getting 10 cents on a dollar. Sort of like what we saw in Rhode Island this past fall and a little bit earlier, where the towns are just too broke. They can't pay the pensions. Several towns and cities in California are doing the same thing. So now a state judge says that the pension mess means that Detroit shouldn't file for bankruptcy due to the pensions it can't pay, as it hurts people. So we've got a city that's out of money, can't pay the pensions anyway. The state judge says, you can't do that because you're going to hurt too many people. They need the money that you don't have to give them in the first place. And plus, I saw last night as well, later on, it dishonors Obama from bailing out the auto companies. So the question I have for you...
Oh, it's worse than that, and I know he's watching.
Yeah, because she sent her order handwritten to the White House. Can we
big old red lipstick on the back of it?
Right.
Yes.
But yeah, let me put a little more context in that, Skip. So actually, the city has been fighting a rearguard action for over a year against having a state-imposed administrator to try and sort out their finances. They finally accepted that administrator a few months ago because they really couldn't get their act together. And after he'd gone through all of the books and tried to negotiate with the creditors, many of whom were said unions and their pension schemes, he finally concluded in writing, regretfully, that he could not square the circle. There wasn't enough money to meet even reduced obligations, and he had no choice but to file bankruptcy.
Well, I think, sadly, that judge may in fact be correct, because in the state constitution it prohibits the cancellation or forfeiture of those pensions. So the Michigan Constitution may in fact support this cuckoo judge. I'm not so concerned about dishonoring Obama, but if you write into your Constitution that you can't go broke, I understand the hypothesis, but I don't think it's going to work. So how do you deal with it?
The Constitution says that I'm entitled to float 2 feet off the ground, but I haven't ever seen it happen.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, it really is a case of where is this now going to fall? Even though we're talking about it, can the courts now force the feds to bail out Detroit? Now, Obama has tentatively said no. Should the California cities feel discriminated against if they do bail out Detroit? Right. Now, you're hearing all about New York. Even though I was much younger, I said, I don't understand why the Fed should be bailing out New York City in the first place, other than if I say Cloward Piven, now you kind of understand
If
why.
you remember, too, you've got San Bernardino, Stockton have both filed for bankruptcy. You've got roughly about 14 major cities in America have filed for bankruptcy. If you remember last year, right before the election, one of the city councilors for Detroit said the reason why we need to vote for President Obama is we need the bailout. So they anticipate that money. I have a problem because, once again, and most of the people in this room probably believe the same way I do, is that this can be solved through a local effort. We're seeing some entrepreneurs in New York who are reclaiming some of the land and doing not only great techniques to resell farming products, but also putting that food back into the community. And one of the problems we're having is dietary concerns within certainly plighted communities. And so they're being very entrepreneurial. Well, why are we not looking to the residents of Detroit who seem somewhat ready to start doing these things and are asking for no money?
Well, there was a marvelous post at a blog site called Notes from the Bunker.
Great.
Commander Zero suggested that perhaps the Free Staters got it wrong. Not New Hampshire, but go to Detroit, because you can pick up all of this property
cheap
for nothing. You can take Ford Motor Company's old River Rouge plant and turn it into a gun manufacturing site. and employ people and regen up the equipment and maybe the Free Staters ought to go to Michigan.
No.
No. I would agree with that. But this whole talk of going green actually sounds very nice. But no. Let me finish. The city of Detroit says we're going to tear down all the buildings and turn it into grass because then we don't have to maintain it.
Right, and I'm not talking turning green either. I'm talking about letting the citizens who are not asking for any money. I mean, there are quite a few rather large ones who are going right to the NBA team, or they're going right and say, look, this is what we're thinking. And they're not doing solar or anything like that, but they're basically, the price of certain commerce good, pork, things like that are all skyrocketing. Detroit used to be a farming community. A lot of people don't realize that they were a farming community. So they're basically saying, well, why not? I mean, at this point. But the other thing is that what that does is it attracts the liberal aspects. And you look at Portsmouth as an example here in New Hampshire. The liberal aspects of being around a community like that attracts businesses who then suddenly come in and say, look, all these extra things that you can do when you're not at work. So what they're hoping is that by bringing this kind of community sponsorship back, as long as we're not paying for it, that they're also hoping, and they're talking to Apple, they're talking to a few other, to say, look, come back in and see some of the things that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and then you can reemploy all the petty criminals because now they have someplace they can go and rob and make a living.
But that means that the people who were running the town, running the city, you look at the city council members, most of them have been behind bars too, so you're going to bring them back too?
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
like
you had the mayor. The mayor was indicted. You also had, I forgot the congressman's wife who was indicted, so you have a congressman's wife who was indicted. and
Conyers.
Right, has pled out.
And Kwame Kilpatrick, of course.
Yeah, there's corruption. We shouldn't be surprised by it. But the thing is that the federal government should have nothing to do with this. I think Snyder has the right approach. And frankly, this is one of those line-in-the-sand moments that we talk about where the governor should say, okay, my state judge, you just don't like my decision here. Can we go ahead and shut that budget off, please? And lock the doors. The governor has a power here that governors don't exercise. And the judiciary has overstepped its authority in so many cases that they should basically go back. And the governor should call that judge into his office and say, you ever dare have a direct communication with the President of the United States without first going through your elected state officials, then we will go forward with impeachment. You will answer to the people of Michigan, not to the people in the Dome in D.C., and that's the problem. The Dome in D.C. is chaos.
And state-appointed judges actually serve at the pleasure of the state governor and legislature.
It depends on what state.
I'm not sure if this one's elected, because some are elected, some are... But, the thing is, the little tricks that they play with the Constitution, the little tricks that they play, they fail to realize that there's one big trick that the states have. Their budget is derived from other than themselves. And that budget can be suspended at any time.
That's where I was going.
I'm a mean guy.
Yeah, that's actually where I was going, is that the legislatures have the power to create courts and circuits and to dismantle them and start over. So if, for example, we're tired of the Ninth Circus, Congress can vote it out of existence, that's California, of course, and recreate it.
Yeah. But, but I think is that when you look at Detroit, I think it's been the biggest story of the week. Although some in the media have decided to go with a different story, this has been the biggest story. It's one of our top 10 cities. I mean, it has but it has 4 professional sports teams, which is a mark of a bigger city in our country. It used to be the jewel of not only the auto industry, but the financing industry. Many of the insurance companies and financial institutions were there as well. Sure. And I don't want to see Detroit fail, and I'm not trying to be mean about this, but the reality is that they can work their way out of it. And Snyder does have a plan. Snyder doesn't want to see them fail. But he also has basically said, federal government, you have nothing to do with this, and you better listen to me because it's going to get worse.
Well, and there's some beautiful quotes out there, too. Sorry, go ahead, Skip.
Yeah.
I think you actually hit it on the head because, whenever we blog about stuff, or at least for the main part, we all do this and we all talk about this. But we look at current events through our philosophy. We all have basic principles that we say, these should be here. yeah, we can be pragmatic about it, and I hate using that because progressives are trying to take that over because, they've already ruined liberal. Now they're killing off progressive against, and now they're trying to call themselves pragmaticists. But
they're neo-progressives. I use the term neo-progressive
Pragmatism
now.
was the means to the end of communism, and the term's been in use by them for over a century.
Yeah, but you hit it on the head. The problem is, you can talk about the entrepreneurs, but if you can't get rid of the governance that was there, the large Democrat-type machine that basically has taken patronage to new heights beyond what Tammany Hall ever thought of.
They've turned it into thugocracy.
A thugocracy, because that's what happens
Like
when you have a mobocracy. When you go to pure democracy, just like our founders talked about, this is what you get. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. You see that all the time. We, on the other hand, you're talking about entrepreneurs and the civil society that has been pushed out of Detroit because government has crowded everything else out. And we're seeing that. And you mentioned that in your discussion on that you see the federal government doing the same thing, that it is crowding out what we used to call civil society. And that's where we get into trouble. We are evil because we think that we can do it on our own. That we as individuals, or as individuals voluntarily banding together to get something done, don't need government. And to Democrats, to statists, to people who believe that government has to be in every part of their lives to be successful, they look at us as literally, if it was a religion, we would be, we are heretics. And the problem is they won't leave us alone. They won't go, well, you can have New Hampshire, we'll take Michigan, yada, yada, yada. They have to force all of us to become government worshippers.
Right. They're like Italian race car drivers. What's behind them doesn't matter. And what I mean by that is if you look at the failed policies all the way through. But the other thing is, and we do this, and the thing is that what liberals fail to realize, and many of the conservatives listening to this, is that conservatives are not do not rush into failure like liberals do. We're very cautious about what we want to do, and we believe in this progression of first, let's talk about it at the kitchen table. If the problem can't be solved at the kitchen table, we then expand it to our neighbors. And there's a methodology in that because what it does is it makes sure it hits the point correctly, and then it also keeps it into the confines that you can manage. I always talk, and when I went down to Washington, D.C., I've talked at CPAC, and when I talk to people, and we talk about the difference between private and government, I always remind them of the New Hampshire Food Bank. And I talk about the New Hampshire Food Bank, and let me tell you why. Every Friday afternoon, at the end of the school day, a bunch of kids who live in families that are having difficulty feeding themselves receive a little backpack. And in that little backpack is the food that family needs for the weekend. Now, these are people, many who have lost their jobs. We've seen how bad the economy is. And at Monday, when that kid comes back, they hand that backpack back. Done without government involvement and done at 99% efficiency, meaning that 99 cents of every dollar that you give is going to this kind of efficiency. And once again, we fail to realize that if we look at these kind of programs, it doesn't have to be the New Hampshire Food Bank. It doesn't have to be, but if we look at these kind of efficiencies that the liberals want to ignore, they don't want to be involved with them because they are coming from Protestants, Catholics, Jewish community members who are funding this. They don't want to look at them as the solution because God forbid we would have religion help us out. But once again, it brings in the bigger narrative is that
that's an oxymoron, isn't it? God forbid we would have religion.
What I'm saying, but what I'm saying is
Good
that
catch.
You look at Detroit, and I know that there's answers in there. I don't want to give people something for nothing, and I do want people to strive for their success. But once again, we fail to realize that there are these successful private programs out there, these nonprofit programs, that the liberals will never look at because the ideology of those particular organizations are not theirs.
Chart. So the chart shows population and manufacturing jobs in Detroit then and now.
Oh, Lord.
So the population may have shrunk to about 600,000, but the number of actual private sector manufacturing jobs is down to about 30,000. And, So basically, the jobs in the city are government and crime, which is why living there is so difficult.
They apparently pay well.
It sounds like an Italian family. You know?
Yeah.
You'll be the priest, you'll be the gangster, you'll be the cop.
And while we're trying to attract private saviors to Detroit, let's just hope they don't watch Steven Crowder's videos.
Steven is doing wonderful work.
Didn't he just decimate the place?
But, you know, this is a problem that can happen. You know, I find it, not ironic is not the right word. Alanis Morissette always screws it up. I'm not going to do that. I find it so comical when those in the federal government say, Detroit, $18 billion, you really screwed up. We need to help you. Let us give you some ideas. And I'm thinking to myself, are you serious?
Really?
You're $18 trillion in the hole of the number that we want to give. You have been so inefficient in your methodology. You're really going to give advice to Detroit, and we know what that advice will be. And sadly,
they're a heroin dealer. Basically, and they just give them another hit.
And the top heroin dealer who's not been impeached, of course, is Ben Bernanke.
Indeed.
But let's.
I think he's mainlining meth, actually.
I got one quick quote because I think Skip's indicating end of segment coming up. Kevin Williams did a wonderful piece about the fall of Detroit in National Review Online yesterday.
It was great.
And I'll just give you his two pithiest comments. Basically, a city that already was corrupt and incompetent saw its tax base evaporate, meaning that it quickly became a city that is corrupt, incompetent, and broke.
Yeah.
And his closing line was, Detroit's ruling class, there's those words again, is a parasite that has outgrown its host. Isn't that a visual?
Well, isn't that what's happening in D.C.? You know, as you become lawless in the small things, you become lawless in the big things. And we're seeing that, you know, from our erstwhile constitutional law scholar president, in that in everything he seems to touch, you know, I often have that joke of, you know, there are some days where I have the Midas touch. You know, a lot of people start to think of the mythology of everything turns to gold. No, mine turns to rust. I see that we're doing that because we're promoting. Again, it all comes down to philosophy, as we were talking about with Father Christian, who's been very silent this time. You got to speak up, sir. This is a free for all.
I am listening to the wisdom of my elders. That's
please. Oh, how you like that? Huh?
We have just been jabbed, folks.
Right. I'm going to follow that parasite comment with.
I got one. Some of our elders.
I got one more line to put in about the parasite outgrowing its host, and what a bad visual that is. You know, they say that politics is many bloodsuckers. Well, that's about what Detroit has got for us.
Politics. I like it.
Yes.
I like it.
You know, I had something that I was going to close out the segment with, and now I've been distracted. Squirrels!
Squirrels, yeah, that happens.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what it is as the music gets ready to play for the end of the segment. You were talking about the food bank and the backpacks. And one of the things I read in the Nashua Telegraph was something about the school lunch program proceeding through the summer. And at the very end, one of the mothers was saying, well, this is great. They get free stuff. This is far better than me taking them to McDonald's and spending $30. So here we go back to the parasites. And what is the moral hazard of providing for everybody, especially for those who may not need to have it? And again, we come to the efficiency that you were talking about, sir.
Right.
Private organizations wouldn't allow that to happen.
No.
Because we know who these people are. The federales don't.
Imagine it was a private school, and they said, sure, we can do your school lunch. The fee for the summer session will be...
Yep. All right, folks, it is time for us to take another break, and we will be back in just a couple of minutes.
So what kind of guests do they have on GrokTALK? Gary Lambert, Ellen Cole, Kevin Bloom, Dr. Julianne Cooper, David Hurst, Don Walker, Jane Cormier, Phil O'Brien, Greg Moore, Jack Kimball, Jen Coffey, Anne-Marie Banfield, Laura Condon, Karen Testerman, John Heichel, J.R. Hull, Guy Lothrop, Ashley Pratt, George Lambert, Mark Warden, and Ed Nail. Should you be listening to
GrokTALK?
Thanks for listening to GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and syndicated weekly through AC Nation Radio. We'd like to make you an offer we hope you can't refuse. You have a local group or a nonprofit? We'd like to promote you right here on GrokTALK for free. You can send us your own 30-second audio promo, or if you send us the words, we'll make one for you, and then we'll play it, time permitting, during our podcast. If you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity, just email steve@GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK. GrokTALk.
Yep. Yeah, there goes Susan. She's already crossing the arms. It's just the way it goes around here, folks.
You know,
Peter St. James lets me get up on the table on Mondays.
Wow.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Oh.
Peter's great.
Are
You
there
know-
videotapes of that?
No, there are not.
There
There's
would
only anecdotal evidence.
There would be here because we have the Grok cams.
That's right, but I have the dollar bills.
Remember, my dear, 10%. 10%.
Church, yes, indeed.
Oh, here we go again, folks. I am Skip Murphy, your host today.
I
of
think we
Grok
have an
Talk.
irreverent reverend with us today.
Yes, poor Jeff is just shaking his head. I'm Skip Murphy, co-founder of GraniteGrok.com, the producer of GrokTALK. We are New Hampshire's leading conservative and libertarian website.
Are you sure?
Did somebody say progressive?
Yeah, I am joined in studio with Grokster Susan, Grokster Mike, Father Christian Tudor, and conservative raconteur Jeff Chidester.
I like that.
That's excellent. I'm going to put that on my business card.
You should.
I'm looking for
You
a new
should. We've been talking. Actually, we talked about philosophy in the first segment. We talked. We got through two of my questions. Oh, gosh, I'm kind of surprised.
Is Detroit
it took this
one
long.
of them?
Detroit
Okay,
was one of them.
okay.
Yes, and Smith and Wesson versus Ben and Jerry's as to who kills the most, and we all agree that the ice cream does. Okay, we were talking about the rule of law and the blue social model, the progressive model. So this one I thought was good, along with that state judge that said that the city of Detroit couldn't go into bankruptcy because then it couldn't pay the pensioners with the money that it doesn't have in the first place. So it's basically trying to force the force the city to spend money. It can't even borrow anymore. So here's another one. President Obama has decided to royally decree that the employer mandate be put off even as the language of the law does not give him that authority. You know, it basically says...
Pish-tosh. Le tête, c'est moi.
Oh boy, we've gone highbrow.
Oh, no.
French.
Oui.
What should the rest of us do? And I thought this was just as good as the state judge. He has also threatened a veto over the new U.S. House vote on a bill that says that we will officially put off the employer mandate for a year. So look at this. He can royal decree it, but we can't do it legislatively.
But the
What
House
the heck have we gone to? Or gone away from?
Well, the House went further, didn't they? Put off the employee
Individual.
mandate,
Yes,
the individual mandate, and the point is that they want the control over the individuals even more than the fascists want the control over the corporations.
Indeed. It's all about control.
But what should we do? Impeach the so and so.
The problem is, do the Republicans in Congress have the stones to do that?
Stones? What stones? I'm taking up a whole collection to get them all spinal transplants.
Right.
Oh,
Would you care to donate?
Oh, the Republican spine recovery unit that
Indeed.
Steve
Well,
has written about.
Yes, we must.
Yeah, I think the thing is that once again we do have that is a constitutional crisis. It was a law passed by Congress, whether we agree with it or not. Congress should be the one to go back, but it brings into the fact that a lot of the shalls, the language shall was reserved to the HHS. And that was the problem that many of us had with the bill, was that too much was being brought over to, was given over to the bureaucrats. And so that made it really difficult for us to kind of look at how we want that legislation to work. But once again, I had Betsy McCall on my show this morning.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
She's
very
a great
cool.
lady.
She is cool, and she come back to New Hampshire. And the thing is that, we actually, when you look at the program, we actually now have more people on without insurance than we did when the program started. So once again, we were trying to solve this crisis we had, and I did a really great article on this 2 years ago. We only really have 8 million people without insurance who cannot
Correct.
access. So that's what we do. We do have a cost concern, and once again, that was a big concern of mine, is I agree we need to get the cost down. But once again, now with this program in the last 2 years, cost has gone up. Those people not covered has gone up. And once again, we're Italian race car drivers. What's behind me doesn't matter. They just have lost the concept of what we want to achieve through these programs.
And that is always the disconnect that from the right standpoint, progressives, their intent is only what is important seemingly, and never the results of the program. And how we get from here to there doesn't seem to matter much at all.
Doesn't matter.
And it really is a case of, is it just a case of wanting to feel good and a forced sense of community with all of this? And again, we go back to the internal governance. Do we do what's right because we know internally it's right, so we go and do these volunteering aspects? Or is it up to, why have we outsourced everything that's good, quote unquote, for people, quote unquote, to government? Father.
Well, as I listen to all this conversation, I always wonder the way that... Oh, excuse me. Oh, now you can hear me.
He's talking through all our mics.
That's right. The concept of shame for the conservative, the concept of shame for the Republican Party. Everyone that has a moral compass that you see is now being shamed into dropping everything that they believe. So we talked about the underpinnings of philosophy at the very beginning, and everything that I'm listening to that everyone is saying, and even with what Susan wants to have that, spinal replacement thing, it's because everyone is being shamed into dropping what they truly believe, what they know that is right, what should be done, how to stand your ground morally, okay? And they're all everyone's being knocked down, because if you speak out, they said you will be punished for it.
I think that's a great phrase. Stand your ground morally. That is the phrase of the show today.
Indeed.
I'm going to. We need to start using that, because that's really what it comes down to.
I'm going to embroider a pillow.
Right now?
It's a good thing I'm not looking at the camera.
Oh yeah, but
What?
Right. It brings up the bigger point of basically, when we look at the healthcare is just one of the problems. Look, Washington D.C. is broken. Jimmy Carter probably said the most right thing he's ever said in a long time about basically, look, although he used democracy, we're a constitutional republic, he seems to have forgotten that. Washington is not, and will not be the answer. And I think that's what we're learning more and more. And I think the regular citizens are learning that more and more. And there was a time, and people forget this time. I don't forget this time. There was a time in America when you had a problem, your neighbors helped you first. And then the churches were there for you. It was very subtle how it was done. And then even if there was a quote, welfare department, it was done by the city. And Mrs. Smith, who ran that department for the city, knew you. Walked into the same grocery stores you walked into. Watch how you used these gifts that were given to you. And if there was an abuse, the next time you came in, Mrs. Smith looked at you and said, "This is your neighbor's money. They gave it to you because you were having difficulty, and I saw you abuse it. And if you do it again, I respect you as a person and want to help you, but if you do it again, I'm not going to give you your neighbor's money."
Well, in the last legislature, didn't we see some discussion about the improper use of debit cards and whether or not we as citizens and taxpayers of New Hampshire had the right to tell someone, no, don't spend your money unwisely because it is your money. It's a question of shame. It is a question of shame. And can we do that? No, we can't anymore. So how do you solve that?
And back to the shaming of conservatives.
Shame on us, actually.
No,
I don't have a lot of shame.
No. But the left the left uses it against us. We have morals, we have shame. That is how, for example, just briefly, they can force out of office Republicans who commit minor transgressions but don't care to do the same to Democrats. So but the basic point is it's jujitsu. They are using our strengths, our morality against us and shaming us from taking up the cause.
Didn't Saul Alinsky make that one of the focal points of Rules for Radicals?
Demonize.
Is hold them to their own standards.
Make them
beat
follow
them with their own stick.
Yeah.
Right.
Force them to follow their own rule book.
Exactly.
But it also, and there's a quote, and I'm going to put up a post on this if I can find out where in my stack of tabs. There was a quote off the new off the corner NRO online, and it quoted exactly what we're seeing is that Saul Alinsky said, your job is not to converse with the other side. Your job is to demonize them. And that's what you see here. But going back to your discussion of, the people in your own town would see these people who have been given these gifts, which are now being seen as entitlements. Before I got off my budget committee, we had the report from the welfare director, which is by law in the Constitution. Every town in New Hampshire has to have one. That's why we rank so badly when people do these surveys of how many welfare people per capita. Well, that's part of who we are. But, they were talking. She was talking about helping people with rent, helping them with oil and stuff like that, and. We know some of these people who would get the money, money's fungible, and the reason why they needed money for oil heat is because they had splurged on booze before that. But she said something, and we also give them cable money. And I looked at the lady next to me, and she looked back, and we both exploded on the welfare director because it's not just the people who are receiving these gifts who believe they are entitled to it, that we have to give this. And I got this when I was running our daycare center as an entrepreneur. These people felt entitled to the state money that other people were providing. But this welfare director was aghast that we would even question her about taking property tax money so somebody could watch a TV. This money, in my respect, was to help you survive, to keep you going. This was not, there was something, I saw it in a blog post, and I should have snapped it up and written something about it right then and there, but there's always too much to write about. But basically, somebody on the left saying, what is it about the right that they just want to keep everybody poor on welfare? It's like, when they can...
Read Ben Franklin.
When they're buying, and I have seen this in front of me, when they're buying a better grade of steak than I am, they're buying lobster that I can't afford, and they're whipping out, at the time it was the actual food stamps booklet, and they were tearing these out, and I saw it again with the EBT card. Well, you have to have the EBT card. I can understand it's cheaper for the state to provide the benefit with that way, but it takes away the stigma of being poor. I'm sorry, I think in a lot of cases, I saw it firsthand. They're riding the train. They're gaming the system. But this welfare director, here's now government entitled, it believes, to use it for non-essential purposes.
Well, you know that I have such a checkered past. One of my stints, not too terribly long ago, was a lobbyist for a group that was purportedly advocates for cities and towns before the legislature. And unfortunately...
That's checkered? Okay.
I actually should be ashamed, truly. But the point is, we would get into these discussions with local town officials, and some of them were the welfare officers because they'd come and they'd talk about these things. And in fact, there were a number of these groups that wanted to have put into law that you could not disconnect someone's cable for non-payment of rent or or things like that, because it these days, my goodness gracious, the internet and cable are basic human rights. If you don't have that, how do you have news, or how are you able to communicate? So all of these things, they wanted to codify that you couldn't do it. You can turn off somebody's electricity, maybe, but they didn't want them to be able to turn off their cable television.
Well, it goes back to what James O'Keefe did with one of his latest videos, which was this Lifeline program with a cell phone.
With the cell phones, right.
Yeah. And
Obama phone.
The Obama phone, yes. And, just giving them away. Oh, I can just trade these in somewhere and I'll get my Versace dress or, the Coach handbag or what have you, my heroin. And this is the kind of inefficiency, again, back to what you said, that these people just feel entitled to do that. And yet, and the response we always get is, well, don't you want to help the poor get a job?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and you bring your brother up, and of course, once again, I'm just one generation removed from the coal mines of West Virginia, and it's a wonderful story about my family. But very quickly, let me just tell you one story that really shows you what we should look at when we think about humanity and we think about what we should be doing with our neighbors. Is I was at an event in Portsmouth on July 4th. It was the reading of the Declaration of Independence, and as we were leaving, there was a homeless person who clearly just did not look good. I mean, there are a lot of factors that could play into that. And one of the individuals that we were with, unbeknownst to us, went up and talked to this gentleman, found out that this person hadn't had a meal in a couple days because most of the charities closed down during some of the holiday seasons. So once again, unbeknownst to us, we went to the restaurant next door, and this person, not knowing, we didn't know this, ended up buying a really nice turkey sandwich and put some extra potato salad, nice iced tea. And while we were sitting at our table, this person went over to this person and handed this person this meal and chatted with him for a little bit. And this person then came back, and we were unknown to us that this happened. The only reason we found out about this is because when we left the restaurant, the person came up to the person we were with and thanked him for the meal that he provided. And there's this connection that's what we want. And think about if we really had that true connection. This individual was named Dan Itza. And if you guys know Dan Itza, and for those of you who listen to this, you know that he has been vilified because he is a conservative person, but he is a person of huge heart. And the only reason we found out about this is because as we left, as I said, this person came up to him and thanked him. He did it without our knowledge. He did it because he didn't need our acknowledgement, but he did it because he felt compelled to help his fellow man. And that's what we are. And government is not that answer. And that's the biggest problem. And then healthcare, like you said, bringing it back to the healthcare, we want to help our fellow man, but we fail to realize is that we do help our fellow man. And it is always the discipline and the shame that exists in the personal relationship that actually benefits man better than what government, because the rules are always there.
So a couple of quick points on that. First of all, what you said about what Dan did, that story could have ended a different way. A lot of people that are in the streets looking destitute and begging for money, if you say, you know what, I'll get you a McDonald's sandwich or I'll get you a Dunkin' Donuts bagel, they say, no, I don't want that. I want money.
The money, right.
Which tells
That's what this guy did.
Which tells you that they're not really starving and they don't really need the money. They're just out there begging.
Oh, absolutely. And this guy wasn't even begging. Dan, and we all know Dan, and like I said, my admiration for Dan is if people who don't know Dan and those on the left who decide to villainize him, they are very corrupt in their villainization of this individual. He is a man of huge heart, and what he does for his community and his family is incredible. But imagine if you told that story, and like I said, I didn't use his name. And I told it to maybe Ray Buckley, or I told it to someone who had villainized him in the past. And then they said, what a wonderful story. I agree with you, Jeff. That's how we all should act humane. And then I said Dan Itza. They would look at you and go, well, I'm not going to give him any credit for being humane.
No.
and you know what's kind of bizarre is actions like Dan's truly do shame the bad guys. And that's what gets their goat.
Well,
It's because it does shame them and their actions and their beliefs because they do know better. They do know that.
Well, it shames some of us who forget where we should be spending our money. Like, and we've made it a point. I'm a huge pro-lifer, and there's never been, and on my radio show, I don't run away from that. One of the things that I asked somebody who says, oh, yeah, absolutely, I'm a pro-lifer and everything like that, I said, well, which ones do you donate to? And they just looked at me and I said, know your convictions, know your principles, stop buying the bumper stickers, and give the money to the people who stand by your principles. And conservatives are losing that a little bit, that we're not defending and sponsoring those groups that do what we say we should be done.
Well, I think part of it is because that notion is being bred out of us,
Yes.
even as we are losing the battle to say it shouldn't be this way. You know, it's basically summed up by the phrase, I already gave in my taxes.
Yep.
And it used to be that we would give freely out of our wallets. It goes back to, again, segment number 1, which is, where does your governance come from? And charity is supposed to be a voluntary act of the heart.
Right.
That nobody has to tell you to do this other than you are raised with that kind of a philosophy. But nobody tells you to do that like Dan Itza did this as well. But we've also seen now, well, we've gone from giving from my wallet to it's taken out of my paycheck by the United Way or some other organization that...
Charity
maybe
has,
not,
right. It
not,
has
not,
to be personal.
Yeah,
it has to be personal.
You may not like United Way, but it might be some other things. Like, say, if there was a check off a Samaritan's Purse or something like that. But it's blind, because most people only see the bottom line of the check. And now, with the massive amount of government and progressives saying, like with this farm bill, they're excoriating the House Republicans. How dare you take... the food stamp program out of the farm bill. Well, that doesn't mean that they're going to make it go away. They'd have a revolution in the cities.
It's still funded for 2 more years.
And it's just going to be done in a separate bill. So you see the progressives saying charity can only come from government.
Right, but 40%, and real quick,
that face is going to get
40%. 40%.
I think the camera may have gotten that one too.
But real quick, 40% of that federal program for food stamps is gone to the bureaucrats and has gone to waste.
Yes.
And so 60 cents of my dollar might get to the people who need it. But like I said, and I'll go back to New Hampshire Charities. Overwhelmingly, if the government really was concerned about feeding people, was really concerned about being charitable, maybe they take that money and say, here you go, New Hampshire Charities, because you're feeding 99 out of 100 people and doing it well.
That's right. As I'm listening to all of this, I'm realizing that what did we learn when we were children? When you watch children interact with each other, if someone doesn't have something, they share.
Correct.
I mean, I work with the orphans over at St. Charles Children's Home, or the children under the Sisters' care in Rochester.
Awesome.
Yes, yeah. And if you watch how children interact with each other, they always want to share. I mean, it's even if you don't want to take it, have a bite of my sandwich. Do you want to drink out of my bottle?
Those kids are just wonderful, and you see that kind of environment that's really promoted. But the thing is, and once again, we go back to where you started this question from. The question that you gave us was, once again, the corporate mandate has been by fiat instead of by legislative process. And now, why not the individual mandate? And the thing is that I had this conversation with Carol Shea Porter, our congressperson in the 1st Congressional. And one of the things that she talked about is that, we needed to do this because we needed to solve the problem. The corporate, and I said, well, you have this little checkbox on your tax that says, would you like to give $1 to help public finance elections? And I said, why is there not a checkbox? Screw that. Why is there not a checkbook that says, would you like to donate to a block grant back to your state, not the federal government, to take care of those people in your state who don't have access to health care? And for one thing, I prefer the state or the city and town controlling something like that because, once again, they're right next to their neighbors.
And it's accountable.
And I said, why wasn't that ever suggested? And she goes, well, I'm not sure that would work, and I'm not sure. And she started humming and hawing. And I said, do you realize that it was suggested? Do you realize that was an amendment that was supposed to be part of the Obamacare bill? And you people voted against it. Like I said, I don't like the plan because it's federal. 314 million people trying to all be covered in one way is a disaster. What people do in Montana and what people do in Louisiana are different. Their health care needs are different, and we should have focused that way. But once again,
My goodness.
Italian race car drivers.
Politics.
Right.
All right, I'm going to switch gears on us because I want to go to something a little bit lighter. We've only got 2 minutes left, so this will be more of a speed round.
Uh-oh.
Even with the new gun laws, there is a city in Colorado that is now wanting to give out drone hunting licenses.
Colorado, we talked about this.
Would you get one?
Can I get me a drone hunting license?
And what would you use for a firearm? Quick, Susan.
My M&P 22 with the wonderful scope.
Oh, okay. That's good for the AR Parrot, the quadra prop type of.
You mean for the big ones?
Yeah, for the
I'd
big
have to
ones.
ask my husband for something.
Oh, okay.
Don't need no stinking license if they're trespassing on my
Well, they're
property.
trying to make money out of this, to fund their Deer Tick, Colorado, or whatever it is, Deer Field.
Since we're granted arms parity with our government, how about a mortar or an M16?
Okay.
No, I don't possess it.
I'm not even sure you want to go on this one. But remember, it's inanimate.
Okay. Well,
But he could call down a thunderbolt.
Okay. Well, since I technically can't bear arms as a cleric, that's okay. I'll just hold some Ben and Jerry's out for them.
Frozen ice cream. I would 50 caliber Beretta sniper rifle. Ooh, yeah, huh?
That sounds like
one of our friends has one, so I know where to go. So,
oh my
our
goodness
friends, a friend of ours, Jerry DeLemus.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I know a few other people.
Rick's got a rather nice 50 cal as well.
Yeah. So there we go. Just boom.
Well, given the stories, my son, the youngest, who came back from Afghanistan, he was the lead gunner for his company of the crew-served weapons.
SAW record. You give me a SAW any day.
This went past the SAW. He was the Nintendo gunner in his souped-up armored vehicle. So he's sitting down, basically he's almost at home. He's sitting there with a little controller, and he's spinning this thing around, and twin 50s on top.
Oh, yeah, but you do realize the FAA announced yesterday you should not be shooting down drones and gave a list of reasons why you shouldn't be shooting down drones.
Oh, I didn't see that. Why?
It could be crash into things, and plus it is government property, and it may have a legitimate purpose. But
I've got a verifiable government license to shoot them.
But what is it? It's Deertail or something like that in
Colorado.
Yeah, it's Deertail, Colorado, which you got to say, Deertail, Colorado.
God bless you.
Why wouldn't they hunt it? And then we talked about it on our show this morning. Is a taxidermist somehow in Deertail suddenly going to be making money out of this? When you shoot
mount
the bear,
Reaper.
you have your little drone, or do you mount it up and they do the taxidermy and everything like that? And then, I just think maybe then do they stock the air with false drones so they can...
Well, I would like
There's a lot of neat things about this story.
I would like to get a Grok drone as well here. And oh gosh, guess what? I think we've run out of time, folks. Because I bet if I do this, yes, there's the music.
Oh my goodness gracious!
I forgot. I got
squirrels.
Yeah, lack of attention, folks. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes here.
Hello, AC Nation listeners. Does this sound familiar to you? Here we go again. Hey, John. This is your boss calling. I know you've already worked 80 hours this week, but we're gonna need you to go ahead and come in on the weekend, too, as well.
What the...
We fired some people, and we still need to get things done at the office. Okay, thanks. I know you're busy. The kids, work, life after work. There's so much to do that there's not enough time to listen in live to your favorite programming right here on AC Nation Radio. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not exactly true. Just hop in your car, plug in your iPod, hit play, and we'll do the rest. That's right, we're on iTunes, so you can listen to AC Nation Radio programming wherever you go, even on your morning commute. You're listening to AC Nation. To find us on iTunes, just search for AC Nation, subscribe to the podcast, upload them to your iPod, and you'll never have another boring commute.
Do you think our country is doing just fine?
Nope.
Do you want the cultural, financial, and political analysis that you just don't get from the mainstream media?
Hell yeah.
Then join David and Brian Terry, the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. That's David and Brian Terry on the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on acnation.com. See you there.
On the Edge with Alan Peteshman, bringing you the edgiest in conservative talk. Mondays at 10 at your conservative safe space here on the AC Nation Radio Network at acnation.com. We'll see you there.
Rock Talk.
Yes, folks, it's Happy Talk time. Once again, we are GrokTALK, a production of GraniteRock.com, New Hampshire's leading libertarian and conservative website where we opine daily on multiple things, pretty much all the time. We try to keep fresh content up there. So if you like what you hear, come on over to GraniteRock.com and read more. And hopefully you'll become a fan of both the show as well as the website. And once again, we have Grokster Susan, Grokster Mike, and our guest Jeff Chidester. And Father Christian is out yakking with somebody else, and that's fine. There he is, late. Yes, we will have you serve penance later.
But the thing is, too, is that, when you think about the people who end up being on your show, I mean, there is a danger for the Father being here because he's got to be careful. He's not sure what we're going to say. And so,
Well, I tell politicians all the time because they're a little hesitant to go here or go in certain places, and I go, not a problem. We can say stuff we know you can't say.
I actually had a business a couple weeks ago canceled their segment with me because you guys know that nonprofits, but also small business is a passion of mine in New Hampshire. I try to promote them as often as I can. Actually canceled a segment because they found out I was a conservative and that I do talk conservative things regarding a topic I had never covered, had not written on, and canceled a segment, 20 minutes of promoting their restaurant because they disagreed with my politics. And I asked them, I said, so you've listened to my show, you've listened to my podcast, and you've read my articles, none of which have ever been fined by the FCC nor kicked off out of a paper that is the portion of the Herald, which is extremely liberal, has ever been pushed out as anything but honest. And he goes, no, I haven't. I said, you're being really unfair to yourself because what you're missing is, one, an opportunity to understand where I'm coming from. Two, 20 minutes of free airtime on the number one news talk station in New Hampshire to promote your business seems foolish to me. But, that's, this kind of table conversation that we have here that I'm sure if a left-leaning person were to listen to us, had they not listened to us before, would probably be somewhat surprised, like the last exchange we had, of our desire to wanting to make sure that we do help our neighbors. But there are better ways of doing it other than handing over my money to the government and watching 10 cents make it back into the community. Better ways.
Well, it goes back to the idea. Why is the norm rapidly becoming outsourcing what should be a voluntary act to the government, to faceless bureaucrats? And it just goes on and on.
Bureaucrats do not do anything out of compassion. Understand that. Now, there may be a compassion element of themselves, but in the end, the one thing you can understand about a bureaucrat is that they will never do something where they believe there's an end in sight. There's no such thing as an end program, no such thing as an end. And although their heart might be good, I talk to people who become journalists or policemen. One of the top answers for policemen and firemen is, I want to help people. One of the top answers for journalists is, I want to tell the truth.
No.
But that's the top answer for a graduate. I want to tell the truth, and somehow that's it. I'm sure a bureaucrat, when they first start at that wonderful job of believing that they're helping people, says that. I want to help people. But when you go back to them in 10 years and say, you've helped everybody, so you're ready to go ahead and close shop, they go, no, of course not.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you.
No, you can't. I'm your guest. You're supposed to be nice to your guest. And where are the donuts, by the way?
I'm not going to embarrass one person.
Don't embarrass my son. My son is an awesome kid, and
They were sold out. The fairs, everybody's bought them all out.
I know. That's all right.
He went and looked.
He's like Homer Simpson. He could find a donut if the donut did exist in Concord, and obviously it does not.
All right. On that idea of the bureaucrats, they're just doing a job.
He's a policeman's son. He must be able to find donuts.
It's funny you say that. His name is Matthew Adams, so named very biblical. First man, and of course Matthew, certainly one of my favorite from the Bible, but I originally suggested the name Duncan, and his mom looked at me and said, "There is no way in hell we're going to name the son of a policeman Duncan, as in Dunkin' Donuts."
Okie dokie then. You were spared, child.
Smoky.
Okay.
You still had to be raised by me, though.
Yes. I'm going to try to get 3 questions in this last segment. We got 21 minutes. Let's see if we can do this.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
That's why you shouldn't invite me.
First, lots of waivers. Then the repeal of the 1099s. Then the Class Act. Then the states refusing to expand Medicaid. Then the states refusing to do the exchanges. Lots of lawsuits against the HHS mandate. Lots of employers dropping employees in their hours for the 50-employee, 30-hour limit. Mm-hmm. IRS breaking the law on intending on giving tax credits when the feds run the exchange, even though the law says those tax credits can only be given out when the states run their health care exchange. Dragooning California teens into being government agents to yak their parents into signing up for Obamacare. We've got the federal data hub that'll look like the NSA being a tinker toy as far as hoovering up personal data. We've got delays on rolling out the exchanges. So tell me, how come Obama is still going to succeed with Obamacare? I'm taking a contrarian opinion here. Why is he still going to, even with all of this, how come he still wins?
Because it's not illegal to be stupid?
That might be a true observation, but that's not the answer. Nice try, though. Next.
Because he subverts the Constitution no matter what he does. It's arbitrary and capricious non-enforcement of the laws of the land.
That's a real good point. Father Christian. Oh, this is a good one.
It is a good one.
People are afraid of being labeled as racist.
Huh?
It's not racist to dislike stupidity.
Yes, but most of the people, and see, those of you that cannot see me, most of you that cannot see me, I am a person o' color.
Oh, yes, they can.
Well, yes, but those listening cannot say, so I can say things that other people can't. But as I've looked around it, I think people are afraid because he is our first African-American president, but also of good white stock, too, that people seem to forget, that they don't want to be labeled as being racist.
Right.
Okay.
And that's
he's white-black. If we're going to call George Zimmerman,
a white Hispanic.
Well, George is Hispanic.
He is Latino.
So let's call Obama a white
So for me, it hit 2 reasons. One, the government gets to make the rules. And 2, the media is going to provide cover. The media determines the winners for the public.
Well, I was going to talk about the media in the second question. My thing is that we're putting out yet another level of dependency that once more people don't have to do for themselves. That is another fundamental transformation. Again, even though we start off on a topic and we go all over the place, not so much this week as we have in other weeks, but we all tend to eventually link everything up because everything is linked for us.
Sure.
As bloggers and commentarianisms.
And
I guess that's a
I'm
word.
A commentarianism?
Well,
I don't like being an ism anything.
Somebody who does commentary. Thank you.
Yes,
he's part of the commentariat.
That's what I was. That's what I was trying to get to. But it really is a case of Americans used to do for themselves, or as you've done very well at explaining, Jeff, you went to the kitchen table, you went to your friends, you went to your extended family, and you worked your way out. Now it's just a case of, and I swear I keep bringing this up, but I cannot get this image out of my mind, of that young black adult lady up to her knees in Katrina with her hands up raised to the helicopter. Yeah. Please save me. Yeah. I mean, that's the picture I get. That plus working in our daycare, of single mothers with a couple of kids saying, well, I have to stay home because my kid's a little, as my wife is walking up with our two little ones up the hallway. She's working full time. But this whole idea that you have to take care of me. That lady in Florida with the 30-odd kids, and they're all packed into one bedroom. I mean, she had kids by how many different people? I put it out on Granite Rock. And then lately that black guy down south who had 17 kids. It's like, somebody's going to take care of them. Where's the personal responsibility go? And that's what we're losing.
Well, you talk about that visual during the storm of Katrina. I lived in New Orleans for close to 10 years. Moved there in the early 80s, right after the first collapse in the price of oil. And in those days, New Orleans had been quite an oil industry-intensive town because of the offshore drilling and
refineries.
Oh yeah. So there was a tremendous pool of skilled labor there. There was a great tax base. But when the oil price collapsed, companies skedaddled, and New Orleans was left behind. And what I came to learn, and really it was a wonderful and horrifying education, was that in New Orleans there were the black ruling class and there was the white ruling class. And they had sort of a tacit agreement between themselves that you leave us alone, we leave you alone. We don't get in your business, you don't get in our business. And it worked quite well because each side, both the white ruling class and the black ruling class, bred their own constituencies and developed their own policies that supported their continuing domination of those two sects, and there wasn't friction between them. And it was only when the money truly began to run out and folks were in trouble, right, that the two had to begin to talk with one another, that truly the wheels fell off, because you learned the depths to which people were subjected truly to keeping them in their place. Poor, uneducated, cut off from truly civil society.
Well, absolutely.
And it was deliberate. It was deliberate, Jeff.
It's the Democrat plantation, which they unfairly want to suck minorities into.
But, the thing is that self-reliance is lost, and there's got to be better ways of getting it. And we talked about shame, too, and I think about the fact of, when we look at it, and I said, I'm one generation removed from the coal mines, and basically what happened is my grandfather decided that when you worked for the coal mines, when he worked for the coal mines, you got store script. You basically got paid by the coal mines with their money, and you couldn't take that money anymore. And what would happen is every year, the Democrats would come into their coal mine village and say, we have $5 U.S. American dollars for your vote. Bingo. And they would hand it out. And every time someone would ask, what happens if I don't vote for your candidate? And the person would say, I'm going to punish your whole village. If we do not get every single vote, none of you will get $5 next year. And $5 was a lot of money. This was right at the top of the Depression. And my grandfather just couldn't conscious that. And he was Catholic, too. To be Catholic in the South was another thing that really segregated you and put you apart. And he basically looked at his family and said, that's it, we're leaving. And he went down and got a job as a porter on the trains. And if any of you know anything about history, porters were reserved for the black community. Yep. But because he was Catholic, that's what he had to do. He was segregated because he was Catholic in a place in which they frowned upon Catholics. And he worked his way all the way up to being a conductor. And every time there was a new position, he would bring one of his black porter friends with him and put him in that position. He integrated the railroad slowly but surely without them even knowing it, because that's what he could do. And I think that I listened to that story about my grandfather, who I never had a chance to meet, and I wonder what happened to America? What happened to America? Tell me how to play. Tell me what to do with my vote. Come on, family, we're moving. And work your way up through sometimes the worst conditions. I still have that in my blood, and I wonder, and I know you guys have it in your blood, and I go, where is this in America now? Where is it?
It's hard to know where it's gone, Jeff, and I'll be honest with you. You know, we talked briefly about the Free State Project switching and going to Detroit rather than New Hampshire. And, you know, I'm looking at them, and I want them to come here. I want all 15,000 of those guys here. I may not agree with them, and some of them may act like the keen kiddies that, you know, don't exactly do such a hot job of representing that philosophy, because a lot of them out there are really anarchists, which most of the Free Staters
can't have that.
Yeah, anarchy will just devolve into the rule of the strong man.
Need that debate. Need that phone line. We got an anarchist who wants to debate us.
Yeah, well, we should bring him in, get him scheduled, and get him in here. But I look at that and go, that's where people have become divorced from their government. They want to live their own lives. They just want to do it. Government really shouldn't be at the forefront, but progressives have made the tendrils of government go into absolutely everything. I challenge each of you, when you first wake up in the morning, start thinking, what I am doing, what I am wearing, what am I eating, what am I driving, what am I doing at work or school, how much is determined already by government? And that's the problem. You've got the bureaucracies who basically, we have one person, not so much. But
you choose black or white, right?
That's right. Yeah, but you look at it, and how many decisions have already been made for you by bureaucracy? Like you said, they don't want their part of government to end, so they have to self-justify and do more and more and more. Excuse me. Which means as they do more, we get less.
Right.
And people don't. It's that incremental boiling of the frog. People. Yeah. Look at the Tea Party. It just sprung. It finally was enough. And we see what government did with the IRS, and they basically crushed the Tea Party. And now the Tea Party is kind of going, really?
They couldn't be right. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because we all play in the Tea Party in one way or another. The reality is that when you talk about that, when we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about self-reliance and what happened to it. We all forget. Go back to the Declaration of Independence. Our Creator. Our rights, our natural rights, come from our Creator. We are sovereign states unto ourselves. And we have to accept that right, but we also have to accept that responsibility. And no sane man would surrender their sovereignty to another person, but sometimes that little surrendering is necessary to bind a community for our own benefit, defense, firefighting, whatever it might be. We have gotten to the point now where government just assumes that individual sovereignty is theirs to define and theirs to determine how we get to use it. And this proclamation of individual, forget it. Remember that you are that sovereign state. You are that sovereign state, and start exercising not only that right, but that responsibility.
And that is why the friend that wants to debate us from Texas, so it'll have to be by phone.
Texas, please. No more Texans.
Just kidding.
You're a New Hampshireite. You are a New Hampshireite. You cannot claim Texas as any more than
one war, one Texas Ranger.
is promoting sovereign living, which is basically off the grid, off the government, as much as possible.
Too far.
But the problem with that is capitalism works, individual responsibility works. However,
it does.
However, voluntary cooperation will only get you so far. Governments are instituted amongst men, yada yada, for the whole purpose of preserving the rights. The question is, how the hell do you constrain it? Because it's not looking very constrained.
Well, and I'm going to break in here because we've got about 10 minutes, about 9 minutes left. And I'm going to switch gears sort of here.
Last question.
Go ahead.
Father?
No, what? What do you want?
Give us an answer.
Did you have something to say?
No. I'm just in awe.
He's leaning in.
Oh, speaking of leaning in,
Elders.
that's a good lead into my next question. The mainstream media always claims that it reflects society, that the media only shows back as a mirror as to what's going on in society and does not influence it. And yet, Chris Matthews saying, I will apologize to you, too, for all white people. It's sort of a step too far. But anyways, the Zimmerman trial not once mentioned the Florida Stand Your Ground law, yet the MSM has it on 24/7. Are they reporters or are they advocates? You said, when journalists...
MSNBC.
Well, hold on. You said the journalists come out, they say they want to just tell the truth.
And they
and
lose
really
that.
it's more of a case of, we want to make the world better.
Absolutely. And the MSNBC is one of the worst groups out there in the world. They're free to say what they need to say, but the problem is that they are the Linus blanket for the liberals. The liberals run to it and wrap it around them and hear what they want to hear and see what they want to see. And sadly, then they go out and they try to debate it. And it's fun to debate an MSNBC pure watcher because what happens is their facts suddenly crumble around them, and they suddenly realize that this organization they believe is their wonderful security blanket. But I want to say one thing about MSNBC. They have inflamed this situation down in Florida so bad that it has gotten me to the point where I'm like, what scum you are to divide your community, to divide races, to divide sexes, to such a point where this hatred and vitriol has been the part of the conversation. Shame on them, and those people should leave there every single night saying to themselves that I am the scum that I say that I'm railing against. And it is sad because the parents of Trayvon seem like very decent people. There's a lot of things about this that just is heartbreaking about this situation, but all they have managed to do is tear the community apart and tear a nation apart again.
But it gets good ratings, Jeff.
It doesn't get good ratings. The ratings, they have dropped again in the last 2 weeks. You know what
but
does
we're
get
all still talking about race riots in Florida.
Right. Brett Baer does 2 news stories. He led with Detroit. He talks about the problems. And once again, they are the Linus security blanket for liberals. And the fact is that it is a sad state of affairs that this conversation became a national story. It is a sad state of affairs that it has managed to split a community, and it is a sad state of affairs, once again, I am called a racist for, one, not even talking about the story.
Well,
I didn't talk about it once.
My question was actually going to be...
Sorry. My son has heard my frustrations throughout the whole week.
Turbocharged squirrels again.
Yes. Is it a case where the MSM really does just reflect society, or are they trying to shape society?
Shape.
And I will tell you that I really got, it's been obvious for years, but the New York Times, 2 reporters on NPR a few years ago actually said, we use the status of the paper to shape the battleground for homosexual marriage. That's just the way it goes. So we talk about the sovereign citizen. How does the ordinary person out on the street who's been educated in a government school without extra help from home understand what the mainstream media is saying, whether it's truth or whether it's advocacy, or now that they just decided to repeal the law that said the American government could not do propaganda here in its own country? Is it going to be propaganda?
They repealed that law?
They did.
Yes, they did.
I missed that one. Okay.
This past week.
So let me put a little social commentary on that. If the media is reflecting society, we're sunk.
Indeed.
Teen moms.
Well,
TV show, right? I mean, it started off on the cover of Rolling Stone, and yeah, it's pathetic. And as a member of the media, and as somebody who looks at it and tries to decide how he reports on stories, I do filter stories. But the thing that I do is that my audience holds me accountable.
Well, we announce all the time. We are conservative, libertarian, and viewpoint. Yeah. We do citizen journalism at times at Granite Rock, where we take the camera, we record it, we put it right up, we'll chop it up time-wise, or maybe by person or by issue, but we don't edit it. We don't do anything like that.
Right.
We just put it up. This is pure commentary, folks. Don't think it is
Right.
other than that.
And let me give you an example. And, Trayvon Martin...
Father Christian's just sitting there going, how do you guys bounce from story to story like this?
And when we look at the media, and they do shape it, and the reality is that this past week, on Tuesday, a young black man with his friend saw a girl being kidnapped, a young 5-year-old, pursued the vehicle on their bikes, and pursued it to the point where that young child was free. Now, if we do have a race crisis in this country, and the media was really concerned about having a conversation, should that not have been the lead story? And say, look, folks, there is this goodness that exists, and they don't. Instead, it was better to keep inflaming the situation. There's a lot of ifs in that story, Sue.
But shouldn't... Oh, he called me Sue. Have you not had the discussion with
no,
him?
Susan,
we have
sorry.
not.
Oh, okay. Well...
Give him a pass once.
You get one. You get
Okay.
one, Sue. But shouldn't the story have been two young boys
Yes, I
saved
agree.
a child? The race shouldn't have made any difference
It
at
should
all.
never
It
make a
should have been
difference.
two children doing the right thing, period.
Right, and I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
I agree with you 100%. But once again, they choose not to talk about that narrative, and then they choose to ignore the positiveness within our communities.
Positiveness.
I make up words all the time, and people often check their dictionaries to see if they're true.
I have a Strunken White in my car.
All right, Suzanne.
Well, we may have to carry this next question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking that all of this goes back to, you're talking about if they shape humanity, if they shape our society. Where are all the parents, where are the educators, where are the clergy in all of this, that it's their duty to inform and to mold young people, not People magazine, not the National Enquirer, not all of these other outside entities. Because what have we done then? We've given over our own moral authority to very questionable outlets. And if that's where our children are getting their morals, or
and we come back to your phrase of the show:
Absolutely.
Stand your
Right.
ground morally.
I like that.
I love that.
You need to be well armed, though, morally,
You do.
And intellectually.
intellectually. Your parents need to arm you morally.
And
Intellectual firepower is the one you need to use first.
Indeed. And
Yes.
then you throw the Ben and Jerry's.
Well, we're often called the safest podcast session here in New Hampshire, and I think you can all figure out what I mean by that, too.
Yeah.
I've got a controversial thing here. Is Salon a leftist website?
Of course it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Okay, a quote from Salon, pardon me here. Some of us have an inner child, others have an inner nigger. Is Holder the president's conscience, or is he his inner and you know what?
And
that is from Salon.
But they can say that.
Salon.
Okay,
They can
but
say
who is the author, so that we don't get nailed by it?
A Rich Benjamin.
Rich Benjamin. Richard Benjamin.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll get in trouble just because you
Use
said
the
it,
word.
but that's okay.
No, that's all right. I give him a pass for that.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you,
you. Absolution, right? Absentively.
Forgive me, Father, I have sinned.
There we go. I'll go.
All Saints, Concord, Howell Street. That's right. 9 o'clock. Is it
That's right,
9?
9 o'clock,
On Sunday
like
mornings.
Mass,
Yes,
yeah.
and I think I'm going to leave us with this because we're just about out of time here. Obama did say during his impromptu press conference, I think it's going to be important for all of us to do some soul searching. There's been talk that we should convene a conversation of race. I haven't seen that particularly productive. Gee, I wonder
please.
why.
Oh, please.
Well, folks, it's been a wonderful 2 hours. I want to thank our guest, Jeff Chidester, Father Christian Tudor. As always, Grokster Susan, Grokster Mike. And we're hoping that Grokster Steve is feeling better.
Better.
Well,
We look
he's feeling well enough to be posting stuff when it wasn't incoherent.
Oh, well, that's good. And I'll put up the rest of the questions, and we'll talk about that online, perhaps. But anyways, I'm Skip. You've been listening to GrokTALK, a production of GraniteGrok.com, New Hampshire's leading conservative and libertarian blog site. See, we don't hide our biases. We're proud of them. Have a good week.
So what kind of guests do they have on Grok Talk? Gary Lambert, Ellen Cole, Kevin Bloom, Dr. Julianne Cooper, David Hurst, Don Walker, Jane Cormier, Bill O'Brien, Greg Moore, Jack Kimball, Jen Coffey, Anne-Marie Banfield, Laura Condon, Karen Testerman, John Heichel, J.R. Hull, Di Lothrop, Ashley Pratt, George Lambert, Mark Warden, and Ed Nail. Shouldn't you be listening to
Rock Talk?
Do you think our country is doing just fine?
Nope.
Do you want the cultural, financial, and political analysis that you just don't get from the mainstream media?
Hell yeah.
Then join David and Brian Terry, the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. That's David and Brian Terry on the Mayflower Brothers, Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Only on acnation.com. See you there. You're listening to American Conservative Nation Radio program, your one-stop network for independent conservative talk. Join forces with us as we battle the establishment political class and cut through the rhetoric like a hot knife through butter. Visit us on the web at acnation.com.
Thanks for listening to GrokTALK, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and syndicated weekly through AC Nation Radio. We'd like to make you an offer we hope you can't refuse. You have a local group or a nonprofit? We'd like to promote you right here on GrokTALK for free. You can send us your own 30-second audio promo, or if you send us the words, we'll make one for you, and then we'll play it, time permitting, during our podcast. If you'd like to take advantage of this opportunity, just email Steve at GraniteGrok.com.